The 2024-25 NBA season was supposed to be a triumphant one for the Dallas Mavericks. Fresh off a finals appearance, the Mavs retooled in the offseason, pulling off a blockbuster trade for sharpshooter Klay Thompson to pair with their superstar duo of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving.
And it's within a shot since the first time late in the first quarter.
Expectations were sky high in Dallas. A return to the finals seemed not just possible, but probable. But as the saying goes, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And for the Mavericks, those plans have gone spectacularly off the rails in the early part of the season. Stumbling out of the gates to a middling 6-7 record, the preseason optimism has quickly given way to frustration and finger-pointing. The team chemistry that seemed so promising on paper has failed to materialize on the hardwood. Tensions reached a boiling point after a gut-wrenching 113 loss to the Phoenix Suns on November 8. In his post-game press conference, head coach Jason Kidd let loose with a fiery rant, calling out his bench players in no uncertain terms. To understand the potential fallout from Kidd's rant, we need to examine his statements in detail. Let's break down the key parts. The fatigue of running Luka and Kyrie 40-something minutes because our bench stinks right now. Right off the bat, Kidd drops a bombshell. Not only does the bench stink, but their poor play is forcing him to overextend his stars. This is a serious allegation. Suggesting Doncic and Irving are already wearing down 10 games into the season due to the bench's failings puts the subs in the crosshairs. A coach is supposed to have his players' backs, but Kidd has essentially hung the bench out to dry here. As deep as we are, we gotta get someone to fucking participate off the bench. This line twists the knife. Kidd is arguing the Mavs have the personnel to field a strong second unit, but the players are simply not participating enough. The implication is they're not giving maximum effort when called upon.
On the drive, lobbing it up top.
For professional athletes who pride themselves on their drive, this is the ultimate insult. Kidd is questioning their very commitment to the cause. We had to leave those two to carry the load, and that's unfair to those two this early in the season. Here, Kidd tries to pivot to protecting his stars, arguing it's unfair to put so much burden on Doncic and Irving this early. But intentional or not, his phrasing essentially throws the bench under the bus again. The unspoken conclusion is the second unit struggles are actively hurting the team's cornerstones. In a star-driven league, that's a cardinal sin. As inflammatory as Kidd's comments are at face value, what he didn't say is just as revealing. Let's take a closer look at the context surrounding this situation. The loss to Phoenix was undoubtedly frustrating, but it wasn't a catastrophic defeat. It was a one-point game against a quality opponent, and the Mavericks even held a lead in the fourth quarter. These kinds of losses are always tough to swallow, but they happen to every team over the course of an 82-game season. It's not the type of game that typically warrants such a strong reaction from a head coach. Moreover, Kidd's comments notably omitted any mention of the team's defensive effort or execution, which were arguably the biggest culprits in the loss. In a one-point game, it's clear that the Mavericks' defense was the primary issue, not the bench's offensive production. It's curious that Kidd chose to focus solely on the bench's scoring output rather than addressing the team's defensive shortcomings. Another striking aspect of Kidd's comments was the lack of self-reflection or accountability. As the head coach, Kidd is ultimately responsible for the team's performance and meeting expectations.
A little teardrop, won't get the tip. Nurk inside, fighting for it.
When a team falls short, the buck stops with the coach. It's their job to put players in positions to succeed and make necessary adjustments. However, Kidd's comments seem to place all the blame on the bench players without acknowledging his own role in the team's struggles. It's also worth noting that we're only 10 games into the season, which is an incredibly small sample size to condemn a bench unit that looked promising on paper heading into the year. Many great teams have started slow and gone on to have successful seasons. It takes time for rotations to gel and for players to find their rhythm. Kidd's harsh criticism of the bench this early in the season seems premature and could be counterproductive. Given all these factors, it's fair to question Kidd's true motivations behind his comments. Was he trying to light a fire under his reserves with some tough love, hoping to spark a sense of urgency? Was he attempting to deflect blame from himself and his stars after a difficult loss? Or did he simply let his emotions get the best of him in the heat of the moment, lashing out in frustration? Regardless of his intentions, calling out players so harshly this early in the season is a risky move. It's the kind of gambit that can either galvanize the bench and lead to improved play, or it can divide the locker room and breed resentment. When you're dealing with professional athletes, egos, and team dynamics, it's a delicate balancing act. For a team like the Mavericks, who entered the season with championship aspirations, it's a precarious situation that could easily backfire.
Moves away from it. Hardaway, 7 seconds. Driving. Washington underneath. Lays it in. Lays it in.
Publicly singling out players can erode trust and confidence, especially when it comes from the head coach. It can create an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, where players are constantly looking over their shoulders and worrying about making mistakes. In a league where chemistry and cohesion are essential to success, kids' comments risk fracturing the very unity that the Mavericks need to achieve their goals. The biggest concern for Dallas is that kids' comments, even if the frustration behind them is understandable, could end up being a self-fulfilling prophecy. Confidence is a fragile thing, and bench players fighting for minutes need to feel their coach believes in them. If they think they've lost kids' trust just 10 games into the season, it can create a crisis of confidence that saps their aggressiveness and effectiveness when they take the floor. This is where we could see the situation snowball on the Mavericks. If the bench plays tentatively, their production will likely dip further, which could lead to even harsher criticism from Kidd, starting the cycle anew. The squeeze-the-toothpaste approach rarely bears fruit in the long run. There's also a risk that Kidd stars get caught in the undertow. Doncic and Irving desperately need a reliable supporting cast to achieve their championship goals and stay fresh for the playoffs. If they perceive the bench as dead weight, frustrating could mount and on-court chemistry could deteriorate. Irving in particular has a history of instability when locker room atmospheres sour.
Irving for the win!
For evidence of how quickly a caustic environment can sabotage a season, the Mavs need look no further than their finals opponents last year, the Boston Celtics. Boston's 2018-19 campaign was derailed by infighting and finger-pointing as Kyrie Irving publicly questioned his younger teammates' capabilities. The toxic dynamic tore that talented team apart. Kidd must be cautious not to let history repeat in Dallas. So where do the Mavs go from here? The first step has to be damage control. Kidd would be wise to walk back his comments in private and remind his bench players they're critical to the team's success. He must take accountability for putting them in positions to thrive and keep their confidence high. The locker room leaders also have a part to play. Doncic and Irving need to set the tone that every role is important and valued. They're the on-court tone setters, but also the emotional barometers for the team. If the stars are preaching unity and support, it can short-circuit the destructive aftermath of Kidd's critique. But ultimately, this falls on the bench players themselves. They've been put on notice that their contributions are needed desperately. The Mavs season likely depends on whether the second unit takes Kidd's harsh words as motivation to step up or an excuse to splinter. If they rise to the challenge and use this as fuel, Dallas could re-establish itself as a contender. But if the discord deepens, their 2024-25 campaign could go down as a cautionary tale. For the sake of their fans and their own legacies, let's hope the Mavericks choose the high road. The talent is there for a deep playoff run if they can come together as a cohesive unit.
5 fouls. So Kai's going to have a go right at it. Wow! Exquisite!
How they respond to this early crossroads will be a test of character and leadership, from the 15th man to the head coach. The basketball world will be watching intently to see which way the dominoes fall in Big D. And so the stage is set for a defining moment in the Jason Kidd era. After boldly reshaping the roster in his image, Kidd finds the team-building portion of his job under the microscope. Can he massage the psyches and personalities on his bench to get them pulling in the same direction? Or will his public rebuke be the catalyst for an irreparable schism? For the Mavericks organization, the stakes couldn't be higher. When you trade for a player of Klay Thompson's caliber, your chips are on the table as a win-now squad. Infighting and underachievement simply aren't options if they want to hoist another championship banner in the American Airlines Center. But if we've learned anything from sports history, it's that adversity can make or break a team's spirit. Sometimes it's the squads that overcome early strife who are forged into the tightest units. The crucible of struggle has a way of clarifying what matters. For Jason Kidd and the Mavericks, this is their crucible. In the coming weeks and months, we'll see if they emerge from it galvanized and determined or splintered and demoralized. There's time to right the ship, but the clock is ticking. Jason Kidd took a gamble calling out his bench so harshly, so early. Will it prove to be a master motivational stroke or a death knell for chemistry? For the Mavs' 2024-25 season and the Jason Kidd era itself, everything hinges on the answer. But hey, that's just my take. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on Jason Kidd's comments and the Mavericks' prospects moving forward. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're always breaking down the biggest stories and trends in the NBA, and you won't want to miss our future videos. And hey, while you're at it, smash that bell icon too. That way you'll be notified as soon as we drop new content. Trust me, with how quickly things change in the NBA, you'll want to stay up to date.